Long ago and far away there were two countries, Computesylvania and Bugtania. They were neighboring countries that didn't get along very well. They weren't enemies, they were not at war, but they didn't exactly like each other either. To keep the peace and keep an eye on Bugtania, Computesylvania sent two spies. One was a merchant who would gather information. The other was a mailman that would bring the information back to Computesylvania. They had a problem is that they needed a signal, a way to meet and share information that no one else would know about. The merchant had a brilliant idea. I'm going to buy a house. Yes, a house with a window, and I will shine a light when I have information to share with you. So the merchant bought a house, and they started their scheme. When the light was off, the merchant had no information to share. When the light was on, he did have information to share, and the mailman would come in to get the information. This was entirely inefficient, as they could only signal, I have information and I do not have information. So the merchant had a better idea. I'll buy a bigger house with two windows, and I can shine a light in each of them to give you more information. So he bought a bigger house with not one but two windows, and they set up a system of on and off. If both lights were off, he had no information to share. If the first light was off but the second one was on, he did have information, and it was safe to talk. If the first one was on and the second one was off, he did have information, but it was not safe to talk. If they were both on, they needed to flee the country in a hurry. Now this was more efficient, but that gave the merchant a better idea. I'll buy a bigger house with three windows. So he did. He bought a bigger house and they set up a system. If all three lights were off, he had no information. If only the last light was on, he had information and it was safe to talk. With this light, he had information, but it was not safe to talk. And with these two on, they needed to flee the country. With the third light on, he signaled that the merchant was being watched. With these lights on, he was signaling that the mailman was being watched. With these lights on, he was signaling that they both might be watched. And with all lights on, he was signaling that they needed to talk and it was urgent. This was entirely more sufficient. Now the merchant noticed that with one light he could signal two messages, with two lights he could signal four, and with three he could signal eight. So he had yet another brilliant idea. He would buy yet a bigger house with four lights. If you remember from our story of the spies, they had a house of three windows. And the order of the lights on each windows mattered, giving them a total of 8 messages. Now that was a lot to write down, so I wrote it down in an easy to read format on which window is on and which is off, and what messages have been said. Now this is hard to read because off and on kind of look alike. So we're going to change that. We're going to set these to numbers. Now we're going to set 0 as off and 1 as on. Now there we go. That's a lot easier to look at. Now you can see that these three are off and these three are on, and all the messages that could be said. Remember that the order of the windows matters. So if this is one light here, this is one light here, this is one light here, they all give 3 different messages. Now this is still a lot to write down, so I want to make it even easier, and I want to put all these in order. Remember, order matters. There we go. Now, if you're using spreadsheet, you want to put quotes on here, otherwise it will not give you the numbers that you want. So I put quotes around my numbers. You can see that this is the order of the windows. All these are off, these two are off, and this one is on. And here are the messages that coincide with them. Your job or your mission is to create a messaging system for spies using 4 windows. Now, obviously, this will give you a lot more messages to create, so that is up to you. Remember, your job is to maintain the peace. So you can use guile and deception, but don't be violent. You want these two nations to be at peace with each other. So go on, have fun with your groups, and create 16 messages that spies would need.